Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a topic that a lot of homeowners totally underestimate, at least until they're waist-deep in sand and permit applications. We're looking at the cold, hard realities of building a deck in Jacksonville in 2026, relying on recent market data, local building codes, and deep remodeling insights. If you think building a deck is just nailing a few boards together on a lazy weekend, well, you're in for a pretty fascinating reality check.
As our sources put it so perfectly, a deck in Jacksonville is a battle against gravity, humidity, and the occasional hurricane. We really need to shatter this illusion that a deck is just a simple DIY project or, just a piece of outdoor carpet. Because the data shows that constructing a deck here, it's a literal battle against some of the absolute most relentless elements Mother Nature can throw at a structure.
So let's get on the same page and redefine what we're actually talking about here. A deck is not just a platform. It is a highly engineered structural addition to your home. In fact, the Florida Building Code explicitly requires what's called a continuous load path. That means everything from the railing all the way down to the solid concrete footings has to be structurally connected. Without that continuous load path and rock-solid framing, it's not really a deck at all. It's honestly just a porch waiting to collapse the second we get a heavy summer downpour, or you have a house full of guests.
All right, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll cover the remodeling market today, more than just lumber, the real cost breakdown, coastal climate engineering, vetting your deck builder, and finally, decoding the contract. It's a structured journey from current market economics all the way through construction metallurgy to how you safely sign that contract.
Okay, starting with Section 1, the remodeling market today, because honestly, you really can't understand deck pricing without understanding the broader market first. To get a feel for the current climate, we look at the NAHB, that's the National Association of Home Builders. They put out this remodeling market index based on a quarterly survey of remodelers, tracking current conditions across large, moderately sized, and small projects. And what this index shows us is a super dynamic market. It measures the rate of incoming leads and inquiries, plus current project backlogs. Right now, demand is incredibly strong, and those project backlogs are very, very real.
So what does that NAHB data actually mean for you? Well, strong remodeling demand directly impacts your budget. Skilled labor isn't cheap, and honestly, it shouldn't be. Looking at the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity's wage data for the Jacksonville area, experienced carpenters and construction managers are commanding premium wages right now. You aren't just paying for a guy to swing a hammer. You're paying a premium for vital expertise in framing, strict code compliance, and building structures that will genuinely survive hurricane-force winds.
Moving on to Section 2, more than just lumber. What's really fascinating here is how this completely shifts where you should be focusing your energy during a build.
You know, homeowners so often obsess over surface aesthetics. They'll spend weeks agonizing over the cost of composite boards versus pine or stressing out over railing colors. But as our sources emphasize, that should literally be the last thing you worry about. The true value, the absolute key to making sure your deck lasts 20 years, is entirely in the unseen structural integrity underneath. We're talking footing depth, fastener metallurgy, and ledgerboard flashing. A gorgeous, super expensive composite deck built on a flimsy, underbuilt frame is, quite frankly, a total waste of your money.
All right, Section 3, the real cost breakdown. Let's see how all these structural necessities translate into realistic 2026 prices.
Let's break down the three main budget tiers for a fully permitted, professionally built deck in Jacksonville, pulled right from recent 2026 project data. First up, the starter deck. A 320 square foot pressure-treated pine deck on a level lot will run you about $22,500 and takes around 7 weeks from pulling the permit to final inspection. Next, the composite upgrade. Bumping up to a 400 square foot composite deck in a coastal spot like Ponte Vedra Beach, that pushes the cost to over $41,000 and the timeline to 9 weeks, largely because of the upgraded fasteners and materials needed. And finally, the entertainer's deck. Imagine a 600 square foot multi-level hardwood structure in San Marco that requires heavy engineering review. That is a $75,000 plus investment and a solid 14-week timeline. This clearly highlights how size, site complexity, and materials completely change your bottom line.
Which brings us to Section 4, coastal climate engineering. The big takeaway here is that Jacksonville's unique environment is exactly what drives those high costs and long timelines.
Building in Jacksonville essentially means building for the coast. Your builder has to engineer that deck to survive 3 specific environmental enemies. First up, constant humidity. This promotes rapid rot, which means every single piece of wood needs a high-quality seal on all 6 sides, plus proper underdeck ventilation. Second, wind. The Florida Building Code absolutely demands strict metal connectors at every single joist-to-beam and beam-to-post connection to fight off hurricane uplift. It's not a suggestion, it's mandatory. And third, the soil. Duval County is famously sandy and low-lying. That means your builder has to dig significantly wider and deeper concrete pier footings than they would in clay soil, just to find basic stability.
Let's zero in on the hardware for a second, because this is actually wild. Out here in the coastal zone, the salt spray in the air will literally eat cheap metal alive. Skimping here is just a fast track to structural failure. To actually pass the city inspection, specific high-grade metallurgy is absolutely mandatory. You've got to use 316 stainless steel or heavy-gauge G185 hot-dip galvanized fasteners and connectors. If a builder tries to slide by with anything less, it's a massive code violation waiting to happen, and I guarantee your deck will be rusting from the inside out within 5 years.
Okay, Section 5, Vetting Your Deck Builder. With those huge physical and financial stakes we just talked about, let's look at the absolute requirements for hiring a true professional.
Finding a qualified builder starts with a strict checklist of 3 vetting non-negotiables. First, an active license from the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation. Specifically, you're looking for a certified building contractor or residential contractor license. A basic handyman license is legally not going to cut it for a structural deck. Second, you need direct proof of general liability insurance to protect your property. And third, direct proof of workers' compensation insurance to protect you from any lawsuits if a worker happens to get hurt on your property. If a potential builder can't hand those over immediately, you need to just walk away.
You also need to be on high alert for major contractor red flags. If someone hands you a vague, one-page proposal that just says build deck, walk away. A real contract leaves zero room for interpretation. If they're using high-pressure sales tactics or don't even have a physical business address, again, walk away. But the absolute biggest red flag of all, if they ask you to pull an owner-builder permit yourself. The contractor should always pull the permit. If they ask you to do it, it almost certainly means they are unlicensed and they're actively trying to dodge legal responsibility.
And finally, Section 6, Decoding the Contract. Let's break down exactly how to legally and financially protect yourself in writing before a single shovel even hits the dirt.
Listen, a professional builder is never going to ask for a massive upfront sum. Florida law actually puts strict limits on down payments for certain contracts anyway. Instead, a pro will tie your payments directly to clear construction milestones and past city inspections. So you might pay a 10 to 20% maximum initial deposit, followed by a payment only after the concrete footings are poured and inspected. Then another payment after the framing is verified, and that final check, that only gets handed over after the city officially signs off on the final inspection.
Now, to stop your budget from totally spiraling out of control due to scope creep, you have to make sure your contract clearly defines a scope lock date. This is a strict deadline, and after that date, any changes you want to make to the plan will automatically trigger a formal written change order. Having this process in place ensures that any new work, extra costs, and impacts on the timeline are completely transparent and signed off by both of you before the work even begins.
And speaking of costs, the National Association of Home Builders highly recommends keeping a 10 to 15% contingency fund for any renovation, but especially on homes over 30 years old, because when you start digging, surprises happen. You might hit buried utility lines, deal with poor soil, or uncover hidden rot right where the new deck is supposed to attach to your house. So if you're building a $30,000 deck, just set aside an extra $3,000 to $4,500. If you don't use it, fantastic. But if the crew suddenly discovers a rotted rim joist, you are going to be so incredibly relieved that money is just sitting there ready to go. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one crucial question to ask yourself before you sign any paperwork for your upcoming project. Are you paying for a surface, or are you investing in a structure? Remember the builder who totally geeks out about stainless steel fasteners and proper air gaps? That is exactly the person you want for the job. They truly understand what it takes to survive the Florida coast. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, stay curious.